Today we're going to be discussing women and the use of time in the films Little Caesar and Once Upon a Time in America. First, we're going to look at women.
One of the major scenes in Once Upon a Time in America is the scene where Noodle peers through the brick wall as he reminisces to his childhood years when he would watch Deborah practice her dance. The soft frame and alluring background music support the idea that Deborah is something to be admired and adored. However, the brick wall between the two adolescents represents that Deborah will always be unattainable no matter how close she actually is. Deborah was and remained one of Noodle's deepest desires, and he was plagued by his inability to have her. This also sets the precedent that this woman would have a deep and noticeable impact on Noodles, although she is a supporting character and he is the main character in this film. We see this concept continuously elaborated on as the movie goes on. There are 2 points in this film in which we see Noodles force himself upon women. The first being during the diamond robbery, the second being after his date with Deborah. These 2 scenes expose Noodles and his relationship with power. In both scenes, when Noodles rapes these women, we see him trying to control the situation and display his power. This is a move he seems to repeatedly make when there is an extreme change or shift in his life. The first attack took place relatively soon after Noodles returned from jail. In this instance, it can be argued that his newfound freedom was the major change he experienced. The second attack took place after Deborah expressed that she did not want to give up on her dreams to be with him. In addition to perpetuating the idea that Deborah will always be out of reach, this scene placed the power in Deborah's hands, and it could be argued that this was Noodles' attempt to take it back.
When looking at Little Caesar, you have Olga, who has more power over Joe that you don't normally see in other films. The first moment where you see this is when she takes the initiative and calls the police on Rico. Joe does try and stop her, but she succeeds anyway, which shows the power she has. However, she still has aspects of the typical damsel in distress. She has all this power when it's just her and Joe alone, but when Rico comes into the room, she runs behind Joe, and this just makes her look small compared to him. This shows that Olga has more power than other women, but she still doesn't have the same power that Joe has in society. Another scene when looking at Olga is when she's trying to convince Joe to quit. They have multiple discussions in the film when she discovers his other life. She clearly doesn't approve, and through some convincing, he leaves the mob. This shows that she has the ability to persuade Joe. Joe's desire to leave the mob is one of the main struggles he deals with in the film, but it isn't until he meets Olga that he actually goes through with leaving. She was the final push he needed to leave, and that shows the power she has on him.
These 2 examples show just how impactful women are in the lives of these crime men. Although they are background characters and have minute roles in the actual film, their impact is major and intensive in regards to the men in these films. Not only are the men deeply impacted by their presence, they are deeply impacted by the decisions and the thoughts that they have as women. Regardless of if they admit it or not, these men act in response to the decision that the women in their lives make, whether it be good or bad.
When it comes to the depiction of time in Once Upon a Time in America, the scene where Deborah and Noodles talk in her dressing room comes to mind. Although it is many years after Noodles and Deborah have seen each other, she looks relatively the same, while Noodles looks much older. Time has stopped for Deborah, while it has not done the same for Noodles. This shows that time is not structured in this film, and as Kaminsky said in his article, rather than time being a prison, this structure allows for more freedom to tell the story. In addition to her looking the same, you also see that she is only viewed through a mirror until she removes her makeup or mask, and the camera finally pans over her true self. By her removing her makeup, this reveals that Noodles always looked at her like she was a fantasy rather than reality. Another reference to time is when Noodles returns from prison and when he comes back into town in the future. When we first see him come back from jail, he is immediately thrown into a party and he begins to relive his past. He is welcomed by his old friends, and apart from their appearance, nothing has changed. They are all still criminals looking to be successful. When he returns into town as an old man, it is very clear that he is reliving the past. While looking at old photos of himself and his friends and even Deborah, it seems as though he's still stuck in the past and he wishes he could go back. This is a common theme throughout the film as he continues to want to go back, but time is not on his side and he is forced to look at his life through different photos on the wall.
Time is essential in the film Little Caesar. Whenever there was the acknowledgement of a watch, clock, or a mention of time, it tended to correlate with the events taking place in the lives of the characters. The scene when Rico turns back the clock after committing a crime can be seen as a symbolic parallel to his tenure in the crime business, with the turning back of the hands being representative of the beginning of his career. Although you can turn back hands, time continues to push forward and it will never stand still. Similarly, Rico may have rose to the top, but it would be impossible for him to stay there. The concept of time was further emphasized by the scene where Rico receives his pocket watch. The watch was perfectly set and ticking. This was symbolic for many reasons. The arrival of the watch represented time moving forward. It could be argued that this insinuated the idea of time running out because the watch itself was the beginning of the end for Rico. As a stolen piece of jewelry, it turned the attention of the police to Rico. Furthermore, being that it was perfectly set and ticking, it showed the progression of time as well, as insinuating that it would be only a matter of time before Rico's high began to fall.